I've been telling you that the whole point of this year 12 is that we can apply this to everyday scenarios. And the place we're applying this to is break-even analysis. It's the idea that when you sell something, you want to try and make your money back. That's called being break-even. But more than that, you're trying to want to make money. Right? Bowen, can you read it out for me? Here's our practical question.
Yeah. Bowen and Eloise some metal bibs part of their business. Calculate the cost C in dollars of making X bibs. They use the equation C equals 40 dollars X. They sell frames for $20 each and determine their income I in dollars.
So I didn't get time to put in pictures. So. That's right. Keep reading for me, Bo. What's the team again called? Yeah, that's right. Why are you doing that to me? Alright, sweet. Okay, so here's the suggestion. The suggestion here, year 12, is that, and we'll look at how they actually get this later on, but you can actually create equations that represent not only the cost that is incurred for trying to sell these bibs. I don't know why it says frames there. I think that's meant to say bibs. So they sell the bibs for $20 each. And so this equation here determines their income. Why do you think that might be? Just to get your head around it. Well, if you sell one bib, it's 20 times 1. If you sell 2 bibs, it's 20 times 2. So you can see why 20x here represents the income that they get from selling those things, because obviously it's just 20 multiplied by how many there are. This cost equation, like a little bit tricky how they might get that. We'll talk about that later on, but just take it for now that these are our equations. The reason why it says frames is because I think I copied the question and changed it to something else. So we'll just change that to bibs. Use this graph here. So in these kind of questions, they'll often give you these graphs, and you can see all you need to do is distinguish between what the graphs say which. Now here's the thing to think about, right? Remember how I said there's something called a break-even point? This is the point here where you make your money back. Think about, though, what happens before and after that. What happens before the break-even point? So this is at the break-even point, we call it. Same thing as the point of intersection where they meet. But have a think, what happens before that? Like, let's say, for example, let's say I sold no bibs. What would that mean? Yeah? You have no money. In fact, you lose money, right? Because this is saying, this cost equation here, C, is saying what is their cost for making the bibs. And so if we sold 0 bibs, how much would it cost us? Yeah, they've spent money doing something, right? So it says to calculate. Let's read the question carefully. To calculate the cost C in dollars. So this is where it gets a bit tricky. In making X bibs, they use this equation here. C equals to 40 plus 10 times X, right? So if you go to that equation, and if we're selling no bibs, what am I replacing X with? I'm replacing X with 0. And what does that give me? $40. So here's the kind of rationale with these equations, right? Let's say, for example, the manufacturing stuff, it costs $40 to sort of set up, maybe your screen prints and that kind of thing. And maybe each of your bibs costs $10 to make. That's why it's 10 times X. So does that kind of make sense what's going on here? Right? So this is our initial cost. It's sort of $40 here. And so any point before the break-even point, this whole section over here, we call it the loss zone. We call it the loss zone because essentially before that break-even point, you're not making any money. In fact, you're losing money. So we call it the loss zone because at any point before here, you haven't sold enough bibs to start making money. Does that kind of make sense, sir? Right? So we call that the loss zone. After that, though, what happens when you start selling enough of these bibs? Well, once you pass the break-even point, what do you reckon you call this guy? The gain zone. Profit zone. Gain zone also works there. And essentially, the questions will revolve around these two sort of sections. It will be saying like, hey, how many bibs do you need to sell to make a certain amount? Or firstly, this one's saying, use the graph to solve the two equations simultaneously for x and explain the significance of this solution for their business, right? So let's have a think here. How many bibs do we need to sell to make break even? Well, it says there, right? If you go to this coordinate here, we need to sell 4 bibs to break even. And what we can say is, well, what does it mean to break even again? Just a reminder, right? To get everything back, right? So if you think about, and you can actually check with these equations here, Tristan. If you substitute in 4 into this part, what do you get here? 20 multiplied by 4, what would that be? 80? And same thing over here, Bailey. If you substitute this into x equals to 4 here, 40 plus 10 times 4 is also 80? Yeah, that's right. So can you see how these costs and incomes are the same amount? And that's what we call the break-even point. And so they often want you to explain the significance of these sort of answers, right? Not just find an answer. So this means the cost and income will be the same. And they will make their money back. So this one's a bit of a wordy kind of answer. Compared to the calculations you're used to doing, this is why this topic's a little bit different. So if you like this kind of analysis, this will be more geared for you. Again, just to clarify though, even though it's a bit more wordy, we're not expecting sort of essay responses. It's still only a 2-mark question, right? So you don't necessarily need to write a whole paragraph on this, right? As long as you can get the point across, I think 2 sentences is more than enough to actually convey what's going on here, okay? So the whole takeaway is, basically, we're finding what we call the break-even point, which is where your income and cost is the same, and you're getting your money back as you guys determine, okay? Yeah, I still need that? If you're done with that, try the next question for me.